Hi there, and thanks for watching another edition of Pauline Interviews. And I'm back with my friend Laurie McQuary, and today we have a really interesting topic. It's reincarnation. And I'm here at Management by Intuition, which is Laurie's business. And Laurie, thanks for doing some more interviews with me. It's always a lot of fun. Excuse me, a little froggy today. But now when we talk about reincarnation, can you give a definition? I have an idea.
Well, reincarnation has been around for a long, long time in other cultures. In particular, in the Eastern cultures, they have believed in this since time began practically. And it's basically, you get to do a do-over. You get to come back life after life for various reasons. Sometimes it's by choice, sometimes it's because you got to. I think about people like Adolf Hitler, and I wonder how many lifetimes is he going to have to come back for to make up. So what you'll hear a lot is the word karma, karmic, heavy thing, that's why you got to come back and do it over. It's not always that. Sometimes people come back just to spend another lifetime together.
And you mentioned, well, that's a all bunch of interesting things that lead to more questions, but since you mentioned that the other cultures believe in reincarnation, many of them do. In fact, I think I read that most of the world does. It's more the Western culture, the Christians and the Judo religions that don't. And
no, I disagree with
they
you.
do now, but back in 1982 I was reading about a poll done by a Gallup poll, and I don't know how good polls are, but in 82 it said 20% of Americans believed in reincarnation, which means the others didn't. But now you go ahead and correct me on that.
Well, it's not correction, just information.
Right.
But I was asked to, up at the Jewish Center here in Portland, to give a class on reincarnation, and that was in the 80s.
Okay, well there you go.
So
you can't
something
trust
was shifting.
everything.
Yeah.
It's shifting.
Yeah, it's shifting. So,
Yeah.
and I think, don't you agree, Pauline? People don't like to be controversial, and they're not going to be running around with a bumper sticker on the back of the car going, boy, do I believe in reincarnation. I have come back again. People aren't going to.
Yes.
And I don't trust polls because I think
Yes.
people don't always tell the truth in them. They're very hesitant.
Yeah, they don't want to be criticized by society.
Right.
And that brings me to the point about a traditional doctor, Dr. Brian Weiss, who was a psychiatrist, and he was doing, I guess, hypnotherapy, or he's doing some kind of therapy where he was taking people back to earlier times in their life, and accidentally, I don't know which patient it was, but somebody slipped back to another lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think he was surprised. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure he probably didn't even believe it at first, but now he's well known for all his books, and I think that has helped open people's minds to
Well,
reincarnation.
because he's a medical doctor.
Yes,
So people trust that.
yes,
And I think when you, and I hate to say it, but the society is very impressed with credentials, in particular if they're medical related. So people want to pay attention to that. And you know, if you watch Dr. Oz, he believes in it.
really.
He talked about it a long time ago. His wife is very much, she's a Reiki energy healer. And heck, he's a cardiologist. And he does bring up questions once in a while, and he goes, I know this sounds a little strange, but when he was doing the Oprah Winfrey show, she had some other doctor on talking about that very thing. And he admitted that he thought it was probable.
Yeah, I think people are more open. Years ago, that even if they believed in it, they were a little more skeptical about mentioning it. And I think what's really helped too is there are movies, there are TV shows. I mean,
There's instant information.
Well, we were talking about that earlier about the internet.
You can Google it and see what they have to say. And actually, there's some pretty good information on it. I just tell people in particular, when they come in for a session with me, just be open. Nothing says you got to change your whole lifestyle belief. But when you have confirmation,
We'll let that go.
after confirmation
Yeah.
about how people will tell me, they'll come in for
Yeah.
sessions and go, I have had dreams and I have met people that I've known things about them. There's many, 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 many books, in particular in India, and that was one of the first ones I had read, is that book was about a little boy who, when he was about 7, lived out in rural India and was telling his parents he really wasn't from where they were at.
Yeah.
He was born 20 miles away, and he started giving all these facts. and they drove him finally, or took him to that village.
Yes.
And he recognized people, he talked to them, he gave them facts about
amazing.
he had lived before in that village. So there's tons of information that has been recorded.
Yes.
Tons of it.
Yes. And you brought up something too that's interesting is child instant recall. Why is it that children seem to be able to?
Because they don't have any filters.
That's true.
They're not sitting around going, boy, that sounds weird. Why would I
Yeah.
say that? Kids are just going, and it's just kind of interesting. I know our grandson came up with a couple of things that were
Really?
interesting. And of course, his mom and dad were always open to this, but we always said, if he's going to tell us
Yeah.
who he is, it'll come naturally, and kids will. And sometimes they'll pop out, and they'll go, I used to live someplace else before I came to your house, Mom. And they'll be about 3 or 4. When kids are around 7 or 8, then they start putting the rationale together. Mainly because they're more influenced by, their parents
Yes.
saying, don't make that stuff up.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you next. What should parents do if parents have a child that is talking about past lives?
Get educated.
Yeah.
There's many, like we said, many good books out there. Brian Weiss, Dick Sutphin, who I've gone to classes with and just really loved him. He's in California. He has written many books. There's information
Out there.
and I think the bottom line is being moderate, is being balanced with it. We don't want to take a child suddenly giving you that information, and you want to also determine, is it coming from a TV show? Is this something he's making up?
Fantasy.
NBC News.
We'll just keep this. Speaking of modern technology and communication,
NBC
yeah, we'll
News.
just keep going. And Mercury's in
guess.
retrograde while we're doing this, so things are going to
My
happen.
phone hasn't rang all day now. It's not good time. NBC News
Uh-huh.
about 2 years ago had a special on the Good Morning Show out of New York, and it was a couple who had a child at about age 5 started talking about he had been in World War II and died in a plane.
Oh, I think I read about that.
And the mother believed, and the
Yeah.
father went, this is nuts. So he started researching. They got the child to come up with a name, where he was from. They found the dead pilot's mother, and the kicker was this child had described the plane, which was something very exclusive to the time and where it was flown from, and he had died.
And how would he have known? I
Not
think
at
it's
that
I think
age.
it's great that the mother believed, but
Yeah.
I think it's good that the father was a little skeptical because
Right.
it caused him to
But
research.
be an open skeptic.
An open skeptic. I think
That's
that was
what
great.
I call it. So they did. They
Yeah.
wrote this book so that they could, and I haven't researched anything on that child since. He's a teenager now. But how interesting that, and he was adamant about it.
Yeah.
And like I said, at the very first, if you're not really open or knowledgeable to the field, you might
Yeah.
be going, I'm letting this kid watch too much TV.
Yeah.
And I could understand that. But if you at least are educated about it,
Right.
what is reincarnation? What does it mean? How does it, really affect our lives now? Everybody gets overly concerned sometimes and go, oh my God, am I here to pay back all these bad things? I call some of it microwave karma,
Yeah.
because this is, if you do something really heavy in this lifetime, let me tell you, sometimes you get it back right now. And not every past life is bad. There's been many, many good lifetimes. I'm working a case right now outside the country of a woman whose child has kind of some severe health issues that seem to be very psychologically based. The doctors cannot find anything wrong. And what we're looking at is a couple or 3 of past lives that they're just like memories from this lifetime. There's things
And they
that
affect us, our memories from this life.
absolutely,
Yeah.
but we don't cognizantly think about past lives all the time. It would be too overwhelming. We live in this present lifetime.
Which is a good thing.
But when you want to access those files are there. You can come in and have a past life regression with me or someone. We can go back and we can look at what had happened. In this particular child's case, I think he's having the physical problems he is because it was tied to his mother dying in childbirth with him. That's one
From a past life.
from a past life.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about part 2, how therapy will help these things.
Yeah,
So we can
absolutely.
actually bring over memories and emotions from previous lifetimes into this lifetime.
Right.
Yeah, and I was going to talk to you about some of those things we bring over, like how about affinities for things, like a love of music or a love of art.
A culture. You know, what if you're Italian, American,
Mhm.
and you absolutely adore Chinese culture?
Mhm.
Everybody would go, that's a little weird.
Yes.
Sometimes we bring that forward with us. Also health, again.
Health too.
Health issues, people who come in with chronic problems, many times if I go back into a past life with them, we can find the cause of it. And this has been relayed many times in books in reincarnation.
Mhm.
But I've had clients who had things that they brought forward, and once they looked at it, saw the reason for it, changed it.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you too, like years ago after college, I went and lived in Germany, and I felt like I belonged there. In fact, I'm mourn, and I always want to get back. I've been back since I lived there 3 times. I feel so drawn
You've lived there
to
before.
Bavaria and the mountains. And I was born in Wales, and I love Wales. It's where my family, all my
Right.
relatives are, and I go back there too. And I like it, but I don't feel as like I belong there as much as I belong in Germany. I have that strong passion.
Also watch cultures that repel you.
Um,
I felt that
yeah.
way very,
Yeah, I
very
have.
heavily many years for Oriental culture.
Oh, I got
Never could understand it.
Yeah.
And then the neat piece was, and I mean, I really had some heavy feelings about
Yeah.
it. My husband and I were flown to Japan to film for Nippon Television in Tokyo.
Wow.
And 300 miles south of Tokyo we filmed. And so I really got an exposure to, and it was really interesting because honestly, Pauline, when we got off that plane, I thought, wow, I have lived here and I liked it. And then I got a darling little interpreter. She was Japanese and of course spoke perfect English, and I was telling her about it, and of course they have a very strong belief system in reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was recounting to her some of the things that I thought that had happened. And it was very interesting. It made a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
It removed a lot of things for me that were unexplained before. Just kind of being able to talk to her about it because she was Japanese.
Well, it's funny that you should say that. I don't have a repulsion that I know of, but I'm not into Asian. I like the Asian philosophies, like reincarnation. I like the Chinese medicine. I think they're way ahead of us in that kind of thing.
Exactly.
And it's kind of a dichotomy because human rights and, we're,
I know it.
so
It is.
it just blows my mind. But I don't have an attraction to Asian, and I love the Mexican people, but I knew I never wanted to go to Mexico. I went for a wedding, and I didn't relate to
there
it.
may have been something from a past life
Yeah,
there.
maybe.
I kind of laugh when I look at the ads on TV for Find Your Soulmate.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is the big thing, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I should be starting a business where I could just really put people together that had lived together before and bringing it back for a wonderful experience. And really what is interesting is when you know and believe in that, and then you have found the right person in your life. It's wonderful. It's like going back and reading a familiar book again.
Speaking of soulmates, because I was going to talk about that, it's funny because I have my friends, most of them are divorced.
But you can have more than one soulmate.
You can.
Do you know what you can have? This is what I call task mates.
Oh,
And
yes,
these
to teach
are
you.
people you're meant to be with, maybe from past lives, to learn certain lessons, and God, let's hope you get it in this one, because you don't want to stay with the task mate the rest of your life.
No, you want to learn to move on.
The soulmate
Yeah.
is really the one, and okay, if you've married a couple of times, maybe you married a soulmate a couple of times.
Yeah.
For different reasons, to different people.
Yeah. And people think soulmate's a romantic thing, but it's not.
No.
It's not a romantic
No,
thing.
not always.
It's coming together for, like you said, a lesson, or it could have been somebody. Maybe you're married now and you meet another person and you're so attracted to them on a spiritual level, and what? And then
you
you
don't
find
act
out
on it, but
you don't act
the
on it.
feeling is there.
It's there,
Yeah.
and we must have been together before.
I think that could
Yeah,
happen.
I researched that one time and I found out this person I met was a twin flame, which I didn't. What's a twin flame?
That's an old saying from
Yeah.
the 70s and 80s.
Nah.
I was never into, the terminology. I just kind of like to tell it like it is, and don't get too fancy with it. And people were very hung up on reincarnation and soulmates in the 80s.
Yeah.
And huge workshops were being given with those. And that's fine. People are seeking that kind of information. When I've given my workshops on past lives, I regressed many as 30 people at a time,
Mhm.
which has been quite an experience for everybody.
Yeah.
So they all go into what they look at,
Yeah.
and I bring them back out after a
Yeah.
hypnosis,
Mhm.
and they write down everything they've seen, and then they share it as the group.
That would be fun.
And it's,
And
it's
mind expanding.
fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating.
The
Yeah.
stories that
Yeah.
you hear people, in fact, I had one class where 2 people recognized each other from a past life. And
Whoa.
it was like tears,
Oh.
and you could have heard a pin drop in the room. And I knew both of these people very well. They were not strangers in my class. I've known both of them for years as clients. And we were all, it was like sitting there watching a movie, because they talked to each other
Mhm.
and said, I'm so sorry that I didn't say goodbye to you when you went off in World War II, which this
Yeah.
guy had done. He died in a plane crash. She was an English nurse,
Oh.
pregnant with his child, hadn't wanted to tell him before he left.
And
He
they
never came
recalled all
back.
this?
They recalled it.
Oh, wow.
And it was, I cannot tell you anything, but
Mhm.
it was moving.
Mhm.
Everybody this was a smaller group, about
Mhm.
15 people. And I used to
Mhm.
hold these at the beach because I think it's always so magical down there anyway.
Mhm.
And it was just awesome. Awesome. And did
Mhm.
they leave their prospective partners immediately?
No.
Of course not.
No.
She was married but working on things in her marriage. He was single
Mhm.
and had been for many years. But they both told me it put to rest old fears that both have had. Hers, and this is what I'd always seen with her when we did sessions, she was always scared to death of abandonment. The guy in her life leaving, either emotionally not being true to her or leaving physically. And he always felt that he was never being told the truth in relationships, that women held things from him. Well, look what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when they hammered that out, and we took a whole probably 45 minutes
Mhm.
and listened to them talk to each other, and it was like none of us were in the room. It was like these 2 people had caught up with each other
Uh-huh.
and said, well, okay, there was no email in those days, but it
Mhm.
sure would have been nice if somebody could have told me you died.
Yes,
You know, it's pretty heavy stuff.
it is. That's a wonderful story. Wait to hear mine.
Oh, okay.
This is even more mind expanding. But when I was working on my parapsychology show, I met a woman who was married, and she was in a yoga class, and she had this weird experience, this guy in front of her. I mean, it just shattered her. And make a long story short, because I remember all the details, it turned out that they went to therapy, and he was a twin soul, which a twin soul, I understand, is one soul comes in and splits, which I don't know.
That sounds quantum physics
Yeah,
to
it
me.
does. It splits. But the
Yeah.
interesting thing was that she left her husband for this man,
Oh.
and he's a gay man. So there was no sexual,
Of course.
but he was gay, but they just wanted to be together. And
Together, yeah.
They spent several years together because, if you believe in this concept, they were one soul, and the other half missed the other half.
But then she started new karma because
Yeah.
she left the marriage.
She left
and
the
she
marriage.
shattered him,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Wow.
So you talk
Yeah.
about maybe having to come back
Yeah.
in another lifetime
Yeah.
to make up for that.
Uh-huh.
That's a pretty heavy thing to do.
Yeah. But this twin soul, I'm not sure, or the twin flames, but
I haven't heard that term for a long, long
Really?
time. So I heard it years ago.
But-
And like I said, I didn't get ever too much into the terms. I just tried to keep it simple for people to understand.
And I don't understand why a soul would split anyway if you come back many, many lifetimes. Do you think we come back in soul groups? I mean, because,
Edgar Casey didn't think so. Not
let's
so much.
talk about Edgar Casey, because we talked about, Brian Weiss and
Dick Sutphin.
Yes, and other people today, but he was many years ago, and he was,
He was, I think, the greatest psychic we ever had. And of course, he's been gone he died in the late 40s, I think, early 40s.
he was a Christian.
He was very Christian. He was a man with a 7th grade education, photographer. And as it happened, he came into being able to lay down on a couch, go into trance, and see people's medical ailments at great distances. And we're talking back in the 30s and 40s. We had telephones, but his wife and his secretary worked with him, and people would write him letters and say, I have this ailment or I have this problem. All of his readings, as he called them, are on file in Virginia Beach, Virginia at the ARE Institute, and they still give classes about what he did. I think his ailments, cures still work. You know, they were very simple and very
Mhm.
basic, but he believed in reincarnation, and he would include that sometimes in the session, saying,
Mhm.
this is why the two of you are back, and this is
Mhm.
what you need to work on. It was quite fascinating.
Yeah, I love Edgar Cayce, and I've got some of his books. So he started the
Mhm.
Association of Research and Enlightenment, and I heard his son speak, Lynn.
Hugh Lynn Cayce,
Hugh Lynn
he's
Cayce.
gone now.
Yeah, and it was an
Yeah.
amazing man.
Well, Edgar Cayce never wrote a book. Books were all
All
written about
by-
him.
about him, yeah.
But he was deeply religious without being overboard about it. He wasn't trying to convert people.
No.
He would just always say, you know, we need to recognize that.
Mhm. So there's a
Right.
compatibility between reincarnation and religion. In fact, you mentioned that
Yeah.
it was mentioned in the Bible.
It's mentioned in the Bible.
Mhm.
You know, I just have always felt it's a very personal thing. And
Mhm.
that's why I don't get, you know,
Mhm.
talking a lot
Mhm.
about it unless people
Mhm.
ask, because it's a very personal thing. But there's many, many, many cultures that go back thousands of
Yeah.
years and believe in it.
Well, I was going to ask you, you know, how do we know if it's memories or memories or fantasies? But I think we've almost cleared that up. I mean, this boy.
Well, let me give you one last
Okay.
explanation of it that'll tell you the difference. I had a lady many years ago, late 80s, came in, told me she wanted to know about a past life. This was before I was regressing people. I would just sit with them and talk with them.
Mhm.
And I said, well, tell me what you want to know about. She
Mhm.
says, well, I have this reoccurring feeling. I lived in the Old West. I lived down in a boot town kind of place out of Reno, Nevada.
Uh-huh.
And we talked about it, and I said, you know, I can see the place in my mind, and I'd not been there. Since then, I've been there because I have family down there. But I'd not been there, and I said, I can see the place, and I said, I'll tell you what, this is your name. And I gave her a first and last name, and I said, sorry, but you were a prostitute, and you lived down there, and you really did have a good time. But, you know, and she kind of went, oh, well, that'll be interesting. And she wrote it all down, or I know, and I was taping in those days, so she probably had the tape. It was probably a year later. She told me she went down to the Boot Hill grave site, found that name. I had never been there. I'd never read anything about it. And she had had the confirmations before
Mhm.
talking to me. She said, I just know I've lived in the Old West.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any really strong, I've never had visions, although I did do a group, and I did see myself maybe in Norway and in the Netherlands.
Mhm.
And I know in this current life, I like snow, I love ice skating, I like the cold weather,
Yeah.
I like the mountains.
So there's been good lifetimes in those for
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
That's all.
so, right.
So I always say, watch what you're attracted to, watch what you're repelled with. And I mean really strong feelings
Yeah.
about it. It's just kind of an indicator. And you certainly don't have to spend all of this lifetime trying to figure out what each
Yeah.
one means. You know,
Yeah.
life's busy enough.
Right,
But if you
Mhm.
want more information, I suggest you get a past life regression
yeah.
and delve into it.
And we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a part 2 and talk about why
Okay.
people would want to go to past life regression
Right.
and what you can do for them. See if there's anything. So it'll be about spiritual growth, so we'll save that for
Okay.
the next thing. But what might be interesting is we don't, like, we're women, obviously,
We come
but in the
back.
past life,
You can be a man as well.
and we could have been a different race.
Absolutely.
We could have been a different sexual orientation. Yeah, and I don't want to get too controversial, but when people
Well, heck, Pauline, it's controversial anyway.
yes, we're incarnations, but I was talking about sexual orientation. I'm open-minded. I have a lot of, you know, gay friends, and what I don't understand is why people think it's a sin to have a different sexual. I can't.
Well,
That's too controversial. Yeah.
You know,
but if we come back,
who
with,
was it? Eleanor Roosevelt said,
Yeah.
"What you think of me is none of my business."
Oh, I love it.
And I really glommed
Oh,
onto that,
yeah.
because I always admired her. But a friend told me that saying the other day, and I thought, gosh, I'd never heard it from her before.
Mm-hmm.
But we're in different times.
Yeah.
But this is why reincarnation is so interesting, is because we do experience coming back as different sexes,
Mhm.
so we can understand,
Mhm.
hopefully,
Mhm.
what the other sexual
Exactly.
orientation is about. And sometimes, and it's been my belief for a long time, that if people go over, meaning die, very violently, unexpectedly for them, they sometimes come back almost immediately to try to resurrect that, to correct it.
Mhm.
And they may come back as the sex that they had issues with.
Oh.
So I think
Uh-huh.
sometimes people who are gay were that other sex in another lifetime just previously,
Uh-huh.
and they're still working on some things. It's very, in some ways, complicated, but it sure explains a lot.
It does explain. That's why I was raised in a religion that didn't answer questions for me. So when I started reading about reincarnation, I said, well, that makes a lot of sense because of all the inequality.
Right.
Some baby is born and put on a doorstep and dies. Another baby is born to royalty and everybody's celebrating. This person becomes instant, famous, and neither one of them had done anything yet.
Well, but
But-
what's interesting that you just keep in mind, you never know who that person sitting next to you on the bus has been in a past life.
Well, that's why I like reincarnation, because maybe the baby maybe he abandoned some baby,
Right,
and maybe the
right.
one that's famous, maybe he did a lot of good. But we're going to talk about that when we do. So thanks for watching Pauline Interviews. We could go on, and we are. We're going to do a part 2. We're going to talk about why would you want to know what happened in your past life and how it can help you, and the kind of therapies Laurie does. So I hope you enjoyed this interview.